Hey guys, it's the Conic, and today we have another really strong league starter that you probably didn't expect to see. We're going to be covering Summon Phantasms using the Soul Rester from low budget all the way to pre-Mage Blood high-ish budget version. If you're wondering why there is no gameplay footage for the build on the screen, that would be because this is a build that I have not made in the past, but I always knew it would be a really strong league starter, but I just didn't have, or I didn't know how strongly it would scale into the end game. But I have been very pleasantly surprised by just how good it ended up being on paper. I will definitely be running this one as my second or third build of the league depending on how things go. Like with my other league start guides, I'm going to be covering how to level this build from the campaign all the way to end game, and I'll be trying to make it as new player friendly as possible. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section down below. So like I mentioned earlier, this build is centered around Summon Phantasm, and eventually we're going to be using the Soul Rest staff. What are Summon Phantasms, you might be wondering as a new player? Well, Summon Phantasms are minions that get summoned when you use the supported skill to kill enemies or hit rares and uniques. Now, Summon Phantasm is typically a support gem. So if you support, like, let's say a zombie with it, whenever that zombie kills an enemy, there's a chance you summon a Phantasm, which then shoots a physical projectile at the enemy. Now, the Soul Rest staff provides a skill called Summon Phantasm. Now, this is not a support gem, but it can be paired with the support gem to increase the maximum number of Summon Phantasms you can have. So with the skill plus the support gem, you're now looking at having a maximum of 22-ish Summon Phantasms versus the regular like 11 cap that the support gem would have. So we really want to use the Soul Rest staff if we plan on actually being serious about Summon Phantasms as a whole. But then when you're using the Soul Rest staff, it changes the summon condition for your Summon Phantasms. It's no longer when you hit an enemy with the skill, because the skill being supported is a skill that summons Summon Phantasm. So that would be counterproductive. So the staff actually gives you an alternative way to summon Phantasms, which is by consuming corpses, which is why on every budget version of this setup, we are going to be running a Cyclone cast while channeling setup to cast Desecrate and then consume those corpses created by Desecrate with an offering, depending on the budget setup. If you're enjoying the content and you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps a lot with the algorithm and with our 2025 goal of getting 2,000 subs, after which I will be doing a face reveal on stream and here on YouTube. So going into the leveling through the campaign version, this is going to be somewhat similar to the Wretch Defiler version. However, there are a few changes, and the changes includes changes to the skill tree, because what we want as Summon Phantasm gamers is quite different from what we want as Absolution gamers. So the skill tree changes along the acts, and there are a few changes. Like now there's an added section for Soul Rest, and you don't switch to Soul Rest section until you have the Soul Rest staff. Before then, you're not really going to be using Summon Phantasms. You're going to maybe use them Act 1, but you're going to drop them and you're going to just be using the regular minion setup Absolution alongside your Spectres to clear most of the end game, because it's a very strong combination. But the moment you're able to afford your Soul Rest, which I expect will be before you finish your campaign, then you want to switch to the Soul Rest version. And the Soul Rest version replaces your Absolution with Soul Rest. So now you're going to have 4 sockets on your Soul Rest. Now it is important to note that with Soul Rest, you do not need them to be linked. You just need to have sockets on the item, because the skill is being provided by the item. So any support gem that's inside the item will support the skill, if that makes sense. So you have the 4 sockets Soul Rest with your 4 socket gems. This will allow you to have, like, if this has a max of 9 Phantasms, and I think you will have like a total of like 20 Summon Phantasm. Math is hard, it's early in the morning. What else? Then we're also going to be adding a Cyclone trigger, so we can actually summon those Phantasms to support, to help us with single target. But my expectation with this gem link setup is that we are still going to be relying on Hyri's Watch for the bulk of our clear, because they're just that good. And then when we get to single target, that is when we switch to Soul Rest, or when we start cycloning. Basically, the reason for this stuttered Cyclone gameplay is because Cyclone comes with a very big less movement speed multiplier. So you do not want to permanently use it unless you have something to counter it. And while you're leveling through the campaign, you don't have that. So that's why I'm trying to limit the soul rest usage for single target and for tough rares. But I think Harry's Watch should be more than enough. We are also switching the aura from Wrath to Hatred because Soul Rest and Harry's Watch have base fizz, and being able to give your minions physical damage as extra cold damage is very strong. And Harry's Watch baseline already have like 50% natural conversion to cold from physical. So cold has always been their stronger element rather than lightning. So that also just helps them become elemental. We do have to drop our curse setup for the cyclone trigger, so just keep that in mind. I might play around with this and see if there's something I can justify leaving or switching, but for now the curse just had to eat the bullet. Then Leap Slam instead of Shield Charge and Frostblink, because Leap Slam does both of them and doesn't have a cooldown, so why not just use Leap Slam? And Leap Slam can be used with staves like Soul Rest. That is a big difference in the leveling section. Anyways, moving on to the low budget setup. For the low budget, we are actually able to pull a total damage number of 5.9 mil, which is insane for a low budget. Now, this low budget is slightly more expensive than the other low budgets in my POBs, but that is just because we're using an anime guardian to bolster the cost or to support the minions. But that being said, we are saving money elsewhere, and I'll talk about it in a bit. But 5.9 million is a very healthy amount of damage. So what are we doing differently here from the leveling section? From here, we're going to be permanently casting Cyclone, but that's expectation. So with our 4th Ascendancy, we are going to be taking advantage of the Katarina Bloodline Ascendancy, and specifically Umbral Army, because Umbral Army here gives you 2% increased movement speed per summon Phantasm. So we are going to be using this to counter the downside of Cyclone's movement, less movement modifier. This paired with having as many specters as we can field, in this case I think it's like 3 specters, we are going to be having some extra defenses. I think they nerfed this increased defenses from 12% to 10%, so we're looking at 30% increased defenses as opposed to 36. So just also keep that in mind. But we are going to be using this for our 4th Ascendancy. And as a disclaimer, we do end up doing quite a bit of Bloodline Ascendancy switching through the budget, so just a heads up there. But yeah, we're going to be using a 12 passive plus Agile with no stats except life. You just want it to be minion damage. And the big thing is you want to be able to get 100% chance to poison on your minions. So that means you're going to go for 1 mod Ghastly Eye Jewels on every socket that's available, and you're going to be giving it % chance to poison enemies. You're also going to be running chance to poison on your Soul Rest. And keep this in mind, while clearing, GMP and faster projectiles are going to be very, very, very good for your clear, but they're going to be very bad for your single targets. So these are the 2 support gems you're going to be swapping out for these 2. How you end up swapping out faster casting is by using an Omen of Blanching. By using an Omen of Blanching, it's going to recolor your staff, but it's going to make at least one of those sockets white. You want to use this until you have at least 1 white socket, and the rest being a mix of blues and greens. Now, again, for Soul Rest, you do not need them to be linked, so that should also save you some cost, and Soul Rest as a stat should be cheap. The only stat you're even looking for on this that is important for this weapon is the minions deal flat additional physical damage. That is the only stat that really matters to you. Everything else doesn't matter. So yeah, these 2 are very good to swap in. And if you do not have if you cannot afford Omen of Blanching to make a white socket, then you're just going to need to use a different green colored socket for instead of faster casting. That will be a net DPS loss, but it's better than not being able to swap out your gems, because you do really want these 2 for clear. And I think faster projectiles especially is underrated when it comes to summon Phantasm. It's just because their projectiles don't go too far, so having faster projectiles helps get that out further anyways, and which again improves your clear. So let's start with the item section and where the cost of this build is going. Soul Rest, like I said, is cheap, so getting a 6 socket early should be on the relatively chill side. I don't think it will cost any insane amount of money compared to like a 6-link chest as an example. So you're going to be able to get a very early 6 socket, which is a big power boost. Then you're going to be using your helmet. The helmet is, you only care about life. You don't really care about minion levels on this build. It helps to keep your permanent minions tanky, but they're not going to die because we're going to be using minions recover life on death. And we're going to be permanently replacing our summon phantasms with cyclone, and which means you're going to be permanently killing your minions and as your summon phantasms, and that'll be funneling life straight to your permanent minion. So your permanent minions are not really in danger of dying, and levels does not help the summon phantasms because the level of the summon phantasm skill is set in stone. It's on the unique. It doesn't go high, it doesn't go lower, it's just 25. And the support gem levels, unless you can get that to 25, it wouldn't change anything. And guess what? Level of some minion skill gems does not affect that because it's support gem. So you don't care about minion levels, the TLDR. Body armor, you're going for life. Honestly, all right, I have added physical damage taken as fire from Ether Worlds on both of these items. And again, if you don't know how to get this implicit, all you need to do is use an Eldritch Ichor on a rare piece of gear on your chest piece and your helmet, and you're going to get a random modifier from Ether World, and you're just going to continue using that until you get Fizz taken as elemental. And probably not Chaos because you might not be Captain Chaos, but you should be Captain Elemental at this stage. And this is not priority, so if it's out of your budget, don't spend all your currency on Eldritch Ichor. It's just a nice to have that improves your physical max hits. Then gloves, everything is just, you only care about life and res, life res attributes, life res attributes. Boots, you care about life, movement, speed, res attributes. Then we're going to be opting for a Jinx Juju. This can be on the pricier side, but like when I say pricey, I mean like 10 chaos to like 20 chaos early on. This is a very nice defensive boost, and we don't really need any other amulets. So we're going to probably be using a rare amulet until we can afford a Jinx Juju. Then rings, you just want any ring with life and resistances. Bonus points if it has a resistance as its base type. And then for your belt, we are opting for a rare leather belt with just life and resistances and of course attributes. Because we're going to be switching our belt to a Leash of Oblation. So my advice is to not actually get any res and attributes you need on the belt, because you're going to be replacing that in the medium budget for a Leash of Oblation, and you might not want to switch around stats all that much. But that is why we are opting for a red belt. You can alternatively switch this to a Darkness Enthroned, and that would give you less survivability but more damage. I think about like 500k more DPS with a 75% Darkness Enthroned with flat physical damage as its primary modifier. It'll give you like about 6.4 million DPS rather. TLI brain. It's a very healthy DPS boost, but because we're replacing it, I didn't feel the need to recommend going that. Then for the jewels, like I said, you're going to want to have max poison chance. So early on, there is an argument to be made about having Darkness Enthroned with 2 poison jewels, just to make it easier to cap your poison. But yeah, we're going to be going for 12 passive minion cluster. This should run you like 10-20 chaos thereabouts. You don't really care about anything else. You just want the important thing is to have the 12 passive. And you fill out the passives as you level up. But the important thing here is to get the 2 socket jewels, or the 2 sockets, as well as picking up all the side socket nodes, so you can also get chance to poison. If you do go the Darkness Enthroned route, you can actually swap out one of these for an Enduring Composure, so you have endurance charges, and that also gives you some defensive layers as well. Something else to note. And like I said before, we are going to be opting for the Katarina 4th node Ascendancy Umbral Army, which should give us 30% increased global defenses now since the nerf, as well as 44% movement speed to counter the Cyclone movement speed nerf. That about covers this section. For the skill section, it's pretty self-explanatory. I've talked about the Summon Phantasms as a whole. Animate Guardian, we are going to be actually gearing him up with let me just show where it is. Dying Breath, which increases your minions damage as well as makes enemies more susceptible to curses. We're going to be using Leer Cast for increased damage for your nearby allies. Broad Call spell, so your AG is actually regenerating 10% of his health per second. Asenath's Gentle Touch, so he applies temporal chains on hit and has a bit of an explode when he hits an enemy. But he has to see the enemy first, so this will help you with wave clear as well. And then Wind Scream, so he can apply an additional curse, so he does not overwrite your Despair curse. That is the AG section. I am also using Ray Spectres, but the Ray Spectres in question are going to be Arena Master, Carnage Chieftain, and Pale Seraphim. Carnage Chieftain is very, very bad for this setup, but at this stage, he is the best Spectre you can have, so to say. Oh, and if you ever move your POB and you don't know how to configure it, all you have to do is come to trigger summon Phantasm, including full DPS. Switch that to 44. Come to the main skill section. Physical projectiles. Now it's fixed. No, not 44, rather. I was so confused. 22. We don't have the helmet, so it's 22. I was like, I don't have 11 mil DPS on this setup. Anyways, Carnage Chieftain is really not great, but it's the best we have. This alternative and would actually be better, but it's not available until later in the endgame when you get to Alhazmin maps or to Conqueror maps. Is going to be a Gilded Arak. That is a spider that provides a damaging debuff that increases enemies' chaos damage taken by 20%, but has a 5-second or has a 50% uptime. So I think it's about is it 4-second uptime, 8-second downtime, something like that. It's 50%, so it averages out to be about 10% increased chaos damage taken for the enemies, essentially. That would be better than Carnage Chieftain, but that's not available until later. All right, let's switch to the medium budget. And one very important thing to note about this setup is we're going to be switching bloodlines from Katarina to Lycia. Now, because we're going to be switching bloodlines, that means we're going to be losing all the movement speed we're getting from our bloodline ascendancy, which helped counter the Cyclone downside. To combat this, we are going to be using a Queen's Hunger. Queen's Hunger makes it so it triggers your 3 offerings on a 5-second rotation. So it starts with Bone Offering, and in 5 seconds it triggers Flesh Offering, and then in 5 seconds it triggers Spirit Offering. The offerings triggered this way are going to be affecting you. So you want the Bone Offering and Flesh Offering triggering this way to last the full 15-second duration, because you do not want to lose those buffs. So you're going to be trying to scale enough duration to get offerings lasting 15 seconds. And we managed to do that by going for minion duration and skill effect duration here, as well as picking up skill effect duration with Potency of Will. We have 10% more skill effect duration here, and we are opting for a Rune Graft of the Warp. Rune Graft of the Warp makes buffs expire slower. So even though you can see this is 11.088 seconds, with this buffs expiring slower, it ends up being about 15 point something seconds. So it ends up crossing the threshold into 100% uptime on your offerings. Also, we are going to be socketing more duration on the body armor, so it supports the offering skills essentially. And the reason we go through all that roundabout method to make sure our offerings affect us is Bone Offering gives you really, really nice buffs. With Bone Offering alone, we're getting very close to block cap. I think we only need spell block with the current offering of effects we have. And to compensate, we are going to be picking up these block nodes as well as this mastery. That puts us at 78, 74 off Bone Offering alone. Bone Offering also gives us 6% life regen whenever we block, which you might see my config, if I can make it big. You can see my config here. It's 6% life regen whenever you block, and you're going to be blocking quite often with this. We're also going to be using the Queen's Hunger that has increased effect of offerings as the first unveil. The second unveil doesn't matter much, but POB hasn't updated. We're having the new unveil, so I couldn't actually put it in here. We're going to be using, for the second unveil, we're going to be trying to use attributes that matter or resistances, as the case may be. We also are going to be getting Flesh Offering. Flesh Offering is how we are going to be countering the downside of Cyclone in this setup. With Flesh Offering, it is an offering that gives us movement speed, attack, and cast speed. The movement speed is going to be very, very good for countering the downside. I think we get a total of I want to say 45-ish%, 48-ish% increased movement speed, which is enough to counter the downside on the Cyclone, paired with boots and flasks and whatnot. I didn't fill out the flask section. I'll do that after the recording. And then we don't care about Spirit Offering, which is the reason we use Spirit Offering to trigger our corpse eating, because we don't care about having the buff ourselves. So by using it, we're going to be overwriting the chest piece buff, which is the one that would apply to us, so we don't lose anything. We're also going to be using Purifying Flame of Revelations as our source of consecrated ground for our ascendancy. What is our bloodline ascendancy? We're going to be using the Lycia bloodline ascendancy, Beta Heresy. This has a small node which increases the effect of curses, but has a big node that turns consecrated ground to profane ground and makes it so profane ground applies malediction as well as chaotic might. Malediction makes enemies deal less damage and take more damage. 10% reduced damage dealt and 10% increased damage taken. And chaotic might to our allies and myself is 30% physical damage as extra chaos, which is a very big modifier. And then profane ground itself is going to increase critical strike chance on the enemies and as well as increasing the curse effect on them. So very, very stacked ascendancy. So we're going to be using Beta Heresy. Other than that, we change a few things in here. Like I said, we're using Queen's Hunger so we can actually get the benefits of Flesh Offering and Bone Offering. We're still going to be using a rare helmet. Your priority is still life and resistance attribute. Gloves, same priority, life, resistance attributes. You can craft minion damage on your glove and then go for the implicit minion damage as well. I believe that's a Searing Exact implicit. Could be wrong. And then we're going to be using our boots with Flesh Offering increased effects just to make it so we are a tiny bit faster and to give us a bit more damage. Because when we're scaling poison, attack speed is king. And giving your minions more attack speed is huge. Then still same thing, movement, speed, life, implicit, and res attributes, all of that. Then we're going to be going for the rings and then the Leash of Oblation. And then aside that, we're still going to be using a double golem setup with Carrion Golem and Stone Golem. Our auras are going to be Purity of Elements, Malevolence, Clarity, and Vitality. Clarity is important just so we can maintain our mana while casting our Cyclone cast while channeling. Anime Guardian is basically going to have the same setup. We're going to be replacing him, so we're not really looking to switch his gear. It's a one and done. You keep using same Anime Guardian. Then we're going to be using Despair as our curse of choice and Convocation in an Onset ring because it is very, very socket intensive on this setup. And the reason we're able to go for a double golem setup is because of this node right here, which increases golem buff effect as well as it gives us an extra golem or an extra max golem slot that we can then use. Aside that, the only important thing to note is we switch from our 12 passive cluster to an 8 passive cluster, so we can actually save points because very point intensive setup. And then we're going to be using Enduring Composure to get endurance charges on this version, and we're also going to be using Runegraft of the Fortress to give ourselves some extra defenses, just so we have a bit of extra ES to defend with. And that covers the bulk of this. Now, for the high budget version, we are going to be using two 12 passive clusters with 35% effect for a lot of attack cast speed and minion damage. We're going to also be switching back to Katarina rather, in terms of blood and ascendancies, and we are going to be using the Umbra Army node on the ascendancy. This gives us 88% increased movement speed because we're going to have 44 summoned phantasms. We're going to be reaching 44 summoned phantasms because on this version, we're making the big Dark Monarch swap into only being able to use summoned phantasms and no other minions. We are also going to be taking off our Queen's Hunger to go back to a rare chest because we want to go CI for these variants. So we're going to be going for a Twilight Regalia and just pure ES pieces all around. We are also going to be taking an Adorned in this setup so we can actually juice flat phase and poison on enemies very efficiently because flat damage is very, very good for our summoned phantasms. We are also going to be using Unholy Might, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, so that we convert all our minions damage to chaos as well as apply Wither for free, essentially. And then we're going to be using an Alzor pricing so we have a source of envy. Without this amulet, we have no source of envy aura, and envy aura is pretty important for the flat chaos. Then everything else is very straightforward. We just need as much ES and resistances as we can for most of our gear pieces. And then the implicits, you can see the implicits, of course. Bone Rings with damage, attack, cast speed, Darkness Enthroned with poison chance, flat phase, and then flat ES, because we don't need any source of life here because we're going CI, which makes our life 1 but makes us immune to chaos damage, which is why we can take infinite chaos damage. Our life pool though is 9k ES, which is still very healthy, or our hit pool rather, not life pool. Then we're going to be using a Storm Shroud to handle our ailment immunity because we drop Purity of Element, I believe, and to completely cover the chance to avoid shock to get us to 100%, we are going to be opting for 22% on avoid ailments for the boots implicit, as well as chance to avoid shock on one of the adorned jewels. Alternatively, you could go ahead and craft a full 100% chance to avoid shock boots. You just have to essence craft with torment to get 58ish%, and then replace flesh offering with chance to avoid shock. You can get like 40 something% there, and that is an alternative that works, and that would allow you to get a bit more damage coming from your jewels. But the reason we don't do that is because we are very suffix starved as is. We are capped on resistances, as you can see, and attributes. However, we do not have too many suffix spots to spare. We can probably make do with the 100% chance to avoid boots craft, but then it becomes very, very tight, and you might end up having to get res on a ghastly IG. It kind of defeats the purpose, really, but that is an option that's available to you. Basically, I just didn't want to make it that attribute starved. We're going for Whispers of Doom on the amulet as an anoint because we are going to be self-applying temporal chains as well as despair via an Arcanist brand. Then, like I said, the jewels are kind of self-explanatory, all ghastly eye jewels, and then we're opting for an Amanamu's Gaze, which gives minions a dot multi per ghastly eye jewels up to 30%, which means we need to run 6 ghastly eye jewels, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have more than enough. And then Enduring Composure as our source of endurance charges. Then for the skill section, pretty straightforward. We're still going to be using Flesh Offering instead of Spirit Offering here because now we don't have a chest piece to... There's no downside to running Flesh Offering ourselves. We're also going to be running Malevolence for the poison duration, Discipline and Flesh and Stone as defensive auras. For our helmet, we're going to be running Steel Skin with cast when damage taken. When you have that up, it improves your max hit by quite a lot. And then you're going to be using Convocation Frostblink as well as Tri-Link per setup, and then Shield Charge as your mobility skill alongside Frostblink. But yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. We are going to be supplementing our block chance with our staff here and here. I believe those are the sources of block, and then outside that we're trying to get as much ES as we can everywhere within reason, of course. That about covers all you need to know to Leaguestart summon phantasms. But if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll be sure to answer them all. As usual, I'm going to be live on YouTube and Twitch for over 12 hours on Leaguestart, so feel free to stop by and say hi. After a league launch, if you have any suggestions for good grafts or Foulborn unique to consider on any of my league starters, I would love to hear them. And if you haven't already, do drop a like if you enjoyed the video. It helps a lot with the algorithm, and a sub as well to not miss out on future videos. And with all that said, thank you for watching.